After the Second World War ended, the Soviet Union threw themselves into nuclear energy with everything it had. For the Soviets, working on the atom wasn't just about generating electricity, also meaning it was proof that their system worked. Nuclear power stood for something bigger, that the USSR could out-engineer the West, that communism delivered on its promises, and that a future of boundless energy was within reach. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was located roughly 100 kilometers north of Kiev, near the border with Belarus, which was among the most precious of this program. Construction began in 1970, and the first of its four RBMK 1000 reactors came online in 1977. By the mid-1980s, plans were already underway for Reactors 5 and 6. Beside the plant stood Pripyat, a Soviet city founded in 1970. The main purpose is that it was built to house the plant's workers and their families. By April 1986, nearly 50,000 people called Pripyat home. It had swimming pools, cinemas, a palace of culture, and a brand new amusement park that was set to open on May Day, just days away. Although there were enhancements upon this image of progress, there were cracks. The RBMK reactor design carried inherent flaws. A dangerous positive void coefficient meant that under certain conditions, a loss of coolant could cause power to surge rather than drop. As historian Serhiy Plokhy documents, Soviet officials chose the RBMK over safer alternatives because it produced twice the energy at a cheaper price. A decision that prioritized output over safety. The information about these design flaws was classified as the operators at Chernobyl were never fully briefed on the risks.
It was 1:23 in the morning. What was supposed to be a routine safety test was already going wrong, so the operators desperately tried to bring the reactor's trapping power back up. But a perfect storm was brewing, a fatal mix of human error, hidden flaws in the reactor's design, and safety systems that had been intentionally turned off. Together, they sparked a power surge that no one could stop. In seconds, the heat inside skyrocketed to 100 times what the reactor was built to handle. The pressure was so immense that a massive steam explosion ripped the 1,000-ton steel lid off the reactor like a bottle cap, leaving the glowing core completely exposed to the night sky. A second blast tore through the building right after, raining burning graphite and chunks of deadly nuclear fuel all over the grounds. The building was in ruins, and dozens of fires broke out in the dark. Worse still, the exposed core was now burning, spewing a silent, invisible plume of radioactive poison high into the atmosphere, a toxic cloud that would quietly drift across vast stretches of Europe in the coming days. Within minutes, the first responders arrived. The plant's own firefighters, led by Lieutenants Bevik and Kibenok, bravely climbed onto the roof of the neighboring Reactor 3 to fight the flames. They had no idea what they were walking into. Without proper protective gear, many of them handled literally radioactive wreckage with their bare hands. Because of their bravery that night, 28 of those men would suffer a death from radiation sickness just weeks later. It wasn't until a full 36 hours after the explosion, late on the afternoon of April 27, that the Soviet authorities finally told the people of Pripyat to leave. They were promised they would be back in just 3 days. They never were. More than 1,100 buses rolled into town to carry away every last resident. Families walked out of their front doors carrying whatever they could hold in their arms, leaving behind photo albums, furniture, toys, and the family dogs and cats who watched them go from the windows. In a single afternoon, they left their whole lives behind. In the week that followed, the danger zone kept growing until it stretched 30 kilometers in every direction around the ruined reactor. More than 350,000 people were uprooted and sent away. That empty stretch of land, some 2,600 square kilometers, became the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, a silent, frozen monument to everything that was lost. To keep the disaster from getting any worse, the Soviet Union called on an army of ordinary people they called the Liquidators. Between 600,000 and 800,000 soldiers, miners, engineers, and everyday citizens answered the call. For years, they worked in the shadow of the burning reactor, doing whatever it took to contain it. In just 206 days, they built the first giant concentric shield, the sarcophagus, around the shattered core. It was an almost impossible job, done under the worst conditions imaginable, by people who knew the risks but showed up anyway. Many of them could only work for seconds, sometimes just a minute or two, in the most dangerous places, especially the roof of Reactor 3, where they had to crawl across radioactive rubble and clear chunks of graphite by hand. They went in, knowing it could cost them their health, their future, even their lives, and for far too many it did. Their courage came at a terrible, lasting price.
The consequences of the Chernobyl disaster spread into many parts of the life: ecological, medical, political, and cultural. The 3 reactors that were still working at the Chernobyl plant continued to operate for some years after the disaster. Reactor 2 was closed in 1991, Reactor 1 is 1996, and Reactor 3, the last one, in December 2000. The original sarcophagus, which was built very quickly and not planned to last long, started to break down over time. In 2016, the new safe confinement, a very large arch structure, was moved into place over the old shelter. It is designed to last at least 100 years and to help scientists safely take apart the remains of the reactor. To understand the size of the disaster, historian Serhii Plokhii explained that even less than 5% of the reactor's nuclear fuel escaping was enough to cause such a big catastrophe. The explosion released radioactive materials equal to around 500 Hiroshima bombs into the air. The exclusion zone became an unexpected experiment of what happens when people leave an area. Without human activity, nature slowly came back. Forests grew over the empty villages, and wildlife increased. A study in 2015 showed that there was no clear negative effect of radiation on animal numbers. In fact, the wolf population was about 7 times higher than the nearby safe places around the areas. As researchers Jim Smith said, this doesn't mean radiation is good for animals. It only shows that the human activities like hunting, agriculturing, and cutting forests can be more harmful than we thought. Many scientists now describe the areas as an accidental nature reserves. However, the long-term effects of the low-level radiation are still being studied. The radioactive pollution didn't stay only in the local areas. Went carried it to the other countries. Belarus received approximately 70% of the fallout, but parts of Russia, Scandinavia, and Western Europe were also affected on that. Farms and food production were damaged, and in some places, restriction continued for many years. The human cost of the Chernobyl is very serious and still discussed today. Right after the disaster, 2 workers died in an explosion, and 28 emergency workers died later from the radiation sickness. But the long-term health effects were much bigger. Thyroid cancer, especially on children who are exposed to the radioactive ion, increased a lot of affected region. The World Health Organization reported thousands of cases. Besides physical health, there were also strong psychological and social effects. Hundreds of thousands of the people had to leave their home and move to the new places around the area. Many of them feel isolated and were treated differently. In the book Voice of Chernobyl, writer Svetlana Alexievich shows how survival felt. One person says, "The world is now divided into 2, us, the Chernobyl people, and you, the others. We are all called ourselves Chernobylites, like we are a new nation." In recent years, the exclusion zone became more popular for tourism. Many people are visited every year, especially after the HBO series Chernobyl. During the Russia-Ukrainian war in 2022, military activities in the zone caused new concerns. Moving to the contaminant cells also spread radiation, again a damage monitoring system. As we come to close to the 14th anniversary of the disaster in 2026, the exclusion zone is still one of the strongest symbols of the 20th century. It shows both human ambition and human mistakes. It's a place that offloads, but also a place where the nature has shown the strong recovery. Chernobyl makes us think about the relation between technology and the society. The disaster didn't happen by chance. It was connected with a political system that cared more about success than safety, and more about image than through. As Sarhi Ploki writes, the world has already experienced one Chernobyl. It cannot afford another. 40 years later, the zone is not completely dead. It is like a living memory. It reminds us that progress always has a cost, and sometimes this cost takes many years to understand. It also gives a warning. The biggest dangers are not always the ones we can clearly see.